Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Coming Good Podcast. It's Monday, February 14th. You know, Dan, I often slide my little cursor right down over my toolbar on the bottom of my screen just to remind myself what day it is. Even when I know it's just sort of habit. And I did it now knowing, no, it's the 14th. It's
definitely the 14th.
Among the more famous days of the year, the more memorable days. Right? The day that the woman I'm married to now, I've been Valentining since I was 16 years old, back in 1983. So I've had that drilled into my mind, you don't miss that day, February 14th. But still,
as long as I've been alive, that's pretty neat.
Really?
I was born in 1983.
Well, we started dating in June 1983.
July 1st is when I was born, so
jeez.
Maybe you had your first date on my birthday. I don't know.
I mean, if things had gone, terribly wrong, could have had a child your age. Woo. Thank goodness, no. But hey, happy Valentine's Day to you. If you carry any Valentine's Day trauma, sorry about that.
Happy Valentine's Day or condolences, either one.
Fourth grade, our class, our teacher had everyone put Valentine's in kids, little
you make a little shoebox or something.
Yeah. Seemed to remember ours was like a lunch bag. I only had two in mine, one from the teacher and one from Anne Berry. That was it. I was not a liked kid in fourth grade. I don't know. Yeah,
that's rough.
Just gonna swallow hard and bury those emotions and have a big lunch later to get rid of them. And I guess teachers don't do that stuff anymore. I think they find a way to make sure that kids aren't just only given.
Yeah, we had a whole list of everyone in my daughter's class, and you got to get everyone a.
Even if your kid is like, I'm not giving him a Valentine. You are.
Yes, you are.
Well, happy Valentine's Day, the most made-up holiday of them all. I mean, it just ranks right up there with Father's Day. All the other ones, really good reason to exist. Valentine's Day, come on. But it's a sweet little holiday. So
there's worse things you could celebrate, I guess.
Totally. It could be like Second Amendment Day or something like that. Oh gosh,
don't give them any ideas.
Yeah, you know why there's not? It's like it's like Kids Day. When you're a kid, did you ever ask your parents, like after Mother's Day and Father's Day, how come there's not a Kids Day? Did you ever ask
why
that?
Not?
I used to say that to my dad, and he said, every day is freaking Kids Day. All we do is feed kids.
Every day is Second Amendment Day around here.
It is Second Amendment Day for the Second Amendment people. They don't want a special day. They want to make sure it's
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, and it comes at a good time in the year and all that, and in a very sports focused time with the Olympics going on.
Yeah.
And of course, yesterday you can't say the official name of this without possibility of being sued by the nonprofit organization that is the National Football League. You can't speak the name, say the name, write the name. You have to call it the big game or something else. About all this? Like
the actual phrase or word is trademarked.
Say Super Bowl. And I learned
just got
this
flagged right now.
Way back in that's right. Way back in the 90s, we had at the church I worked at as a youth pastor, and we had a night, a Sunday night to watch the Super Bowl, and had big screens and that kind of stuff. And man, ran into all measure of trouble around that.
Oh yeah, just trying to show the game to 10 youth group kids. So it's like,
yeah, totally.
Oh, they're out to get you.
Or just trying to describe it in the church newsletter as the Super Bowl. You can't. You got to refer to it as the big game because they gates all that stuff, or apparently claim to. But that's not really the biggest sporting event yesterday. I think the biggest sporting event was from the Discovery Channel, the Puppy Bowl, and Team Fluff sinks baby teeth into victory. I mean, that thing is just the most adorable, isn't it? That they do a Puppy Bowl. I've never ever watched it, but now with the frequency of images that come flailing by my life, you just get to see them. And this year, I'm reading off of a news article about it. Was the largest competition of puppies with more than 100 dogs from 63 shelters in 33 states. And none of these dogs are trained in anything. They just put them out there. And the goal is whatever dog drags a chew toy into the end zone and wins. And then all the other rules and, things that they have to decide on are all made up on the fly just to avoid
That's great.
and to make cuteness.
Yeah.
So,
I like
yeah.
that.
So much better. So much better. Just cute little dogs running around doing cute dog things.
We need more of that in the world.
But, instead yesterday it was just a team that really believed in each other and dug down deep and played well. Did you watch the Super Bowl yesterday?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I watched it. Watched the first half with some friends, some elder millennials and Gen Xers. And so we were all very thrilled with the halftime show.
Oh, man.
I wasn't super invested in who won. I was kind of cheering for the Bengals just because of the underdog story. But, man, once you got to halftime...
boom. Boy, that was really something. I'll tell you, I put on my Facebook feed, best halftime show, Super Bowl halftime show ever. I think something like that, right? And I post a lot of things on the social media channels, especially on Facebook.
Fairly controversial at times. But,
really?
But none so controversial as this comment, apparently.
Most just go without, any engagement. As of, like 14 minutes after posting that, 43 comments.
People had opinions.
Oh my gosh. And I don't know if this ever happens to you where you have a sort of a post that more people tend to like just write stuff about. All of a sudden people I hadn't heard from since, 2008 when I joined Facebook.
Totally.
Are like, well, Prince, how about that one, or a thumbs up or something. I'm like, wow. Yeah. Just a reminder at what a collective spectacle the Super Bowl is.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing amount of people that care about that thing. And I'm not big into hip hop. I don't know hip hop music. I knew all of these artists. So that says something about its crossover appeal, that's for an audience much, much broader. I don't know how many times you Googled this last night, like I did. Like, how old is Snoop Dogg? How old is Mary Blige? How old is Eminem? Did you?
Yeah, they're in their 50s, I think. Yeah.
49 for Eminem, 51 for Mary. I didn't look at Kendrick Lamar. I think he's in this at 24.
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg is 50. Dr. Dre is 56. So hip hop finally gets his center stage, and it's for people in there. Also by the AARP. Which
me and my friends were sitting around. We're like, finally a Super Bowl show that's relevant and cool that everyone can get behind. And then you sent this meme, said, if you're stoked about this halftime show, it's time to book your colonoscopy.
That's cool.
And we sort of realized, like, oh, we're the old audience now that they're targeting. It's like back when they had the Rolling Stones or whatever.
Yeah, or whoever it was, Springsteen, Prince. Prince seems to be a standout for a lot of people. That didn't seem so age specific. And maybe it's just because I know a lot of people who are really connected to Prince being in Minneapolis. But
yeah. I mean, Prince was probably the best halftime show.
Yeah,
playing Purple Rain in the rain. And he's just shredding this insane guitar solo in the rain
alone on a stage. It was epic. But
this was a close second.
Totally. Partly because what I liked about this one is it was just a halftime show celebration. It didn't take itself quite as seriously. Like Snoop Dogg coming out and his head,
just having a good time.
Can't speak to his blood chemistry situation at the time, but just looked like a guy that was, using some of the newly approved California recreational, chemicals. He just, the whole thing was, it wasn't so, sometimes it feels like those halftime shows are something more than honoring a musical act after its years and, just trying to do more. It's not a concert. It's a great little show. And all those people in it, 50 Cent coming in, hanging upside down. Come on. That's just all these little homages to videos from, I don't know, whatever, 1992 or 94 or something, 96. That was just, I thought, really, really fun. And I felt like you wouldn't have to know a lot about the music to just be like, it was visually fun. It was positive feeling. It just seemed really great.
Yeah. There was speculation, though, even before the show started. How are certain audiences going to respond to this? Like, what are they going to find to be mad about? And Charlie Kirk called it sexual anarchy, called the halftime show sexual anarchy. But this is where, it was another unifying moment of the Super Bowl that liberals and conservatives have united to dunk on this take.
Yeah.
Because it was just like a fun party. It wasn't anything crazy or promiscuous or...
No, I mean, there's the kind of dancing that you do that some people interpret to be overly sexual. But look, the Buddhists are right that you see the world as you are much more than seeing the world as it is. So if you saw that as sexual anarchy, well, have a little chat with whoever your spiritual or psychological counselor is about how it is, because, my friend, sometimes a cigar is just simply a cigar, as Freud for saying. Like that. Remember 2 years ago, though, I remember being on the Vote Common Good bus. Don't remember where we were, but the Super Bowl show, which then I think I posted greatest Super Bowl halftime ever. I think it was J-Lo. And that thing, remember that one?
Vaguely.
Oh, really? Oh, dude. If somebody had written Super Bowl is, sexual, that one had a little sexual vibe. Remember the Puerto Rican flag and everything? Oh, it was just a spectacular, but this is the problem with halftime shows. Yeah, look, how many years ago was it that Janice Jackson, the FAA or the FCC had to get involved because of Nipplegate, when her
the
shirt
wardrobe malfunction.
Yeah, wardrobe malfunction. Look, it's supposed to be fun and party kind of atmosphere. It's the Super Bowl halftime show of all things. What do you think this whole dealio is? So I thought really great. Congratulations to the $1 billion franchises that spend all their money for one team to win over the other at the last minute.
Yeah,
but good for
good for them. And it seems like the right team won, because here's a little fun fact for you. The Bengals owner, Mike Brown, contributed the maximum $5,600 to Donald Trump's reelection, while the Rams COO, Kevin Demoff, gave $2,800 to Democratic presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg, my boy.
He only gives it to Buttigieg. He doesn't even give him the full 5,600.
Didn't max it out, but we'll take what we can get.
He kicked in a little $2,800
of his multi-millions.
Yeah. But you're right. Look, I mean, people scrutinize this kind of thing. And I saw some other article. I don't know the validity of it, but it was basically like two great teams with two horrible owners. So I don't know the background on the owners.
Yeah. If you dig anywhere below the surface of the NFL, it's all hot garbage. It's just like
trashy owners. I mean, just
and racism and just terrible people that are very wealthy.
Which again just brings us back to the Puppy Bowl. We just had none of that. There was no drama. This was like no drama. Just like Super Bowl III back in the day. The team that is represented by the state that I live in, the Minnesota Vikings, were in the Super Bowl a couple of times back in the 60s or 70s and never won. And during the Super Bowl, they had a promo for a news piece coming saying, Bud Grant, who was then the coach, does an interview about, what you learned from the Super Bowl. I thought back when the Vikings were in the Super Bowl, a lot of the NFL players, this wasn't even their only job, I think. I mean, I'm not even sure being a professional football player was, you
Yeah.
might
Like
have also
maybe the quarterback was making enough to but
really,
the linemen, they were having to deliver pizzas.
yeah, they were working at the grocery store in the off season for sure. They were butchers and bakers and those kinds of people. So this whole thing has become, I heard a news story yesterday. It was on Freakonomics radio. So it wasn't really a news story, but it was a radio story. And it was about how specialization is the thing that's allowed the United States to become a successful nation over the last couple hundred years. We've made a decision to really have people specialize in certain skills.
Mm-hmm.
And the example they were giving was in the NFL, the newly discovered value of the long snapper, the person that snaps the ball for punts and for field goals, that now has become a specialized role where they have to go recruit certain people. It has just gotten to the point of, probably because the athleticism is so high and the game is so restricted and there's only so many things you can do.
To improve and get an edge. Yeah.
I mean, I will say this as someone who thinks the Super Bowl or the NFL is a really damaged brand and that our treatment of sports is indicative of lots of things in our society that should be different. The athleticism of NFL players is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like the things they're able to do inside of a very contained set of rules is really remarkable. Throwing those balls, catching them, running by people, just tackling someone, simply being tackled and then getting up and going again. It's, maybe back in my 20s, I could, I was fine being slammed to the ground, even with pads on, and then just pop right back up. But man, I watched both quarterbacks, I think, took serious bends and dips to their knees and ankles. And like, oh my God.
How are they still walking? Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, okay, all that to say, but still.
It's let people have fun. Let people enjoy things in this desolate wasteland of COVID. And
that's a good point. Just the Puppy Bowl is fun too, though, and there's just none of that other nonsense going on. I guess that's what sort of irks me about the NFL is does it really have to be all the other things that it is for people to have fun? But I'll say the thing that I'm not finding very much fun myself are the Winter Olympics. Are you watching them? Do you?
Well, see, I was just gonna say, talking about something that isn't, a massive spectacle, but that is pretty fun. The U.S. curling team. Like, have you watched any curling?
In my life, I'm a Minnesotan, so it's like half.
Oh yeah, you're from
Minnesota,
curling mecca. Yeah,
are curlers. So yeah, I mean, I've watched it. I haven't watched it this Olympics.
Part of the appeal is the mustaches and the hair. I don't know if you've seen the team, but pretty incredible mustache and mane situation. And they just looked like a bunch of dads that, had a club and somehow stumbled their way into the Olympics. And I think that's great.
And now it's an Olympic sport. Yeah. And this is the thing. My commentary on the Olympics should be thrown out, with the daily, fish paper. But the things they have to do to make the Olympics continue to be including more sports and more people and making sure there's equity across the genders has just turned it into something that feels ridiculous to me. Now the Monobob Sled, is a big thing trying to get some news because the woman who won the single person in the bobsled, like it just has become when sports are this obscure, like the people skiing and shooting. I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah.
That's just it's been around for a long time, so like I get it, but that sort of thing, or of course all the snowboarding kind of variations and tricks and competitions built in within that. So many of these sports feel like things that I would see on a YouTube video or a Facebook video feed, where it's like, here's an incredible sport where people bump a ball across a net with just their chests. it just feels like obscure sports to me. So maybe I don't know, kind of missing. I'm not saying they shouldn't have them. They're just not all that interesting, to watch and even curling is like, what a strange sport to be at the
I've watched
international
a fair amount just because it takes the longest to complete a match. I think it's on the most, like it gets the most airtime because it just takes forever to do. And so I was folding laundry the other day and it just happened to be on for like an hour. And I still don't know how the scoring works. Like you got the 2 rings and I still couldn't tell you.
Yeah. And okay. Well, happy Olympics.
Happy Olympics.
Does it end Sunday or Friday? When's
this is the last week, I think. But man, the snowboarding has been really fun to watch. Yeah, just incredible to watch. They're doing flips and spins like you've never seen, Doug.
I can imagine. I'll spend a little time this week catching up.
Watch the highlights of the snowboarding.
Well, that's been part of the thing I haven't wanted to do, is to watch the NBC coverage. I don't know if other people watch the NBC coverage, but all that prepackaged stuff and all the backstories and the drama that they do around it, and just I don't know,
all the human interest. I don't care about where they come from.
Could not care. Thank you. I feel terrible saying that, so I'm glad that somebody will voice it for me.
But voice it sarcastically, but yeah.
Like it's almost like they've taken a page from the back, and this was years before. It's not just this year. They've been doing this for years. It's like a page from reality TV or The Bachelor or something, like trying to get you hooked into the story of these folks. And I don't know. And it starts tapping your nationalism. Like we should really be rooting for this team over the other, and this person. So anyway, not really my thing. But other people love it. I'm sure there's comments in here, of people that know how to appreciate the Winter Olympics for all the Winter Olympics. Hey, but here's something I didn't notice too much in the Super Bowl, or have heard too much about in the Olympics, short of, they live in a bubble as inside the Olympic Village. And that's COVID. It feels like, Dan, that COVID is coming to its final days in this country, at least this Omicron version. And, if another one flares up, but boy, it feels like in the last 3 weeks, it has just, the numbers have crashed. The deaths are starting now to decline. Hospitalizations are getting back to something more reasonable. And all indications are that hospitals are going to return to normal levels, which, we'll talk about this a little bit later. It's not as if the medical industry has, solved for future pandemic problems.
Yeah, it's not like things were great before the pandemic either.
Yeah, I mean, running such tight margins, just seems to be not the way you take care of a health system in a nation of our size and of our economy. It just seems like. But overall, the COVID numbers, boy, it seems like it's going the right way. It seems like we're going to be done. I think now the fight, the struggle is going to be for the people who will want to preserve mask wearing indefinitely. And I only say that as a slight exaggeration. I mean, there are people for whom the idea that anyone will ever get COVID is something that all of us have a personal responsibility to have to wear a mask to prevent. And I'm starting to hear that, especially amongst the people who are been very vigilant about mask wearing, and rightly so, during the height of the pandemic. I don't know how they ever turn that off. And I mean, I'm hearing lots of sort of people in the media talking about, boy, it's way too soon to be taking off masks. I'm not doing that. And then they name, the reasons why, because of vulnerable people, which is true. But at some point, I don't know how, do you think we should sort of stick with, hey, masks are the norm when you're in public spaces, as opposed to masks being something only invoked when there's a true pandemic that is rivaling or is attacking the health system?
Yeah, I don't see any viable way to continue mask mandates on a large scale, but I could see things like, maybe you should wear a mask on the subway when you're crammed in with a bunch of people. I can see something like that sticking
Yeah.
around. But the CDC even has, issued new guidelines, and it's really pretty fuzzy. Like there's like 5 variables that you have to take into consideration, like whether or not you should wear a mask in a place. And so it seems like things are really becoming what they always were, which is you do what you think is best based on the information you have.
Yeah.
The problem is getting good information, and that's where this idea of a COVID forecast is really interesting, because it seems to be, it goes in waves, and certain areas of the country are, dealing with it more than others. Maybe we view it as like pollen count and, gauge whether or not you should mask up or alter your behavior in some other way.
Yeah, look, we've never had a good forecast, and what's up on the screen for people that are watching there is this was an article that was advocating for us having something more like a weather forecast, and we haven't had that, and it's been something I've been surprised at. Early on, I think we generally agreed, sort of April, May, June of 2020, that we needed to bend the curve because the numbers were going up, and that was all to make sure that the hospitalizations didn't overwhelm our system. We didn't have treatments and didn't have prevention in vaccines, or even knowing what particular actions would cause transmission of the virus. Because remembering back to December 2019, where the 19 of COVID comes from, the year, and January and February, early March, all of the health experts in the United States believed that nothing like a coronavirus would be spread by people who were non-symptomatic. This was the big argument. And all of those people have now said, we had that wrong. It turns out that the COVID vaccine is transmissible, even when you don't show symptoms. So early on, it was all about symptoms, right? And that's what prevented the United States from invoking any kind of action in January and February and even early March. Was they said, well, the number of the people that have symptoms isn't very high, so we don't believe the virus is here and all that level of intensity. Then all of a sudden, these symptoms just showed up by the hundreds of thousands, especially in certain locations like New York. And it became clear, people are passing this asymptomatically.
Right.
In fact, there's some great news stories about China trying to say to the World Health Organization, and specifically the United States, this is being passed asymptomatically. And because of the knowledge at the time that was assured to be correct, they didn't follow that advice. That was a huge, huge setback for the United States. Then we started to figure out, well, what's it going to take to prevent the spread of this? Remember setting our packages outside and not wanting to have delivery surfaces? I don't know that but still in lots of places, there's this whole thing about wiping down surfaces and washing hands and so on. I don't know where the medical evidence is on that, scientific evidence is if coronavirus is passed that way. What we do know is that it's passed through spittle and it's passed through the air, but predominantly through, liquid vapors in the air, more commonly more heavy levels of spittle. And that just gets passed in lots of environments by people. So masks certainly made a whole lot of sense. But is that something that we're going to want to say to one another? And are we going to have a society by which people are free to wear a mask if you want, or to not wear a mask if you don't want? That is going to be, I think, long after the COVID numbers have declined and we've said we've bent the curve again, and we are no longer in jeopardy by any, by best case scenarios of overwhelming the health system. What's going to happen with mask wearing? And I think it's going to continue to be a real bone of contention with people. There's going to be a lot of frustration around people who don't wear masks, and then people who are wearing masks. People are going to get irritated when somebody wears a mask. They're going to revert to like Trump in 2020 when someone's wearing a mask, right? Remember when he was saying stuff like, "Hey," to the reporters, like, "Take your mask off. How come you're wearing a mask? You're afraid?" Remember that kind
Yeah.
of. That's going to come back now. People are going to be like, "Hey, it's time for you to stop that mask wearing," and then other people are going to be saying, "I believe you have to keep wearing a mask. We still have too many vulnerable people," and I don't know how, as a society, we're going to ever sort of move forward on this. It's really going to be so. While COVID feels like it's moving into the background as a pandemic, what's the word they use for it? An endemic. Endemic, meaning it's around like the flu or other things that we just learn to live with it, but it's not at a pandemic level. Boy, this is going to be a real cultural cross point. And I think it's going to cause all kinds of consternation at work, at churches. I went the other night to a monster jam where
Like monster trucks, right?
monster trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. A little boring, frankly. I was surprised at that because it just was a little bit repetitious. But these trucks are unreal. Like they do tricks and stuff, and these big tires and these big crazy trucks. So I was at this football stadium here in Minneapolis. So big, huge stadium like that. And there was a mask mandate in place. Everybody had to wear a mask. When we went in, I would say 50% of the people had a mask on. No one was enforcing it. By the end, because you could take it off for eating and drinking. And by the end, walking out, I had my mask on. I counted maybe 6 other people in the crowd of, I don't know, hundreds that were moving together through the corridors. We're all jammed now in the little corridors, walking out and going down the escalators. Maybe 6 or 7 people that had a mask on at that point. It was just tens of thousands of people inside in a place where the posted signs were masks are required, no enforcement, nobody wearing them. Yeah. And I didn't pick up any real weird vibe, where people were like, "Hey, take your mask off." But I don't know. I feel like without some agreement about when and how we take off masks or stop certain protocols, and it's just kind of at the decision of lawmakers or rule makers, whoever makes the rules, people that run an organization or a business or a city or a county or a state. I don't know. I think we're in. I feel like that piece we've never really handled well to mark by what standards our decision is going to be made.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And that's the frustrating part too, is when there were statewide mask mandates for indoor places or countywide, it gave businesses kind of the cover to say, "Hey, we're not the bad guy, but please just help us out, wear your mask." Now when it comes back to it's on each individual business and storefront to enforce and decide who should wear a mask and can you come in if you're not wearing a mask. It's going to lead to so many, angry Karen moments, and
Totally.
it's just going to be more of that mess. Like, you can't tell me what to do. And
yeah, look, there's a nice comment. I was thinking the same thing from PJ Bird in the chat here, where PJ reminds us that Japanese folks have been wearing masks for years on airplanes and in other public places. I mean, in Japanese culture, it's very common to see people. I think Chinese culture as well. For years, I've watched people wearing those masks. So it's just kind of normative.
And it seems like a good idea. COVID aside, everyone's got tons of other germs that I don't want, so I'm going to keep wearing a mask when I'm in small enclosed places with large groups of strangers. Yeah,
I don't know. It's going to be. I wonder how well we're going to accommodate to it. Yeah. It felt like 6 months ago, 9 months ago, when the summer was coming, remember, and it felt like masks were coming to, or COVID was coming to an end, and almost had a mission accomplished moment from the Biden team.
Yeah.
It felt like people were like, "Man, am I even going to keep my mask? Like, am I going to have it around?" And I think Omicron was sort of like, "Yeah, probably don't want to throw that thing away yet. This could surge at different moments." But it's kind of the big news story that, frankly, I know everyone is tired of it. I mean, I'm certainly in that camp. I just want this to be over. But there's a lot of things I'm tired of that aren't over, and I don't know. I don't know where this goes, because I've had more friends that I personally know get sick with COVID in the last 3 months than I did in the first, 12, like by far. There was a long period of time where I'm like, I don't know anyone who's gotten COVID yet. It's really amazing. Now it's just like bing, 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 Omicron just all over my vaccinated people. The most careful people that I know in my world have contracted COVID. Mm-hmm. And they have done everything meticulously.
Yeah, everything by the book.
Yeah. And the thing I've been very helped by, I just heard one NIH person, I think, say you have to distinguish between infection and disease. Early on in a pandemic, the distinction between infection and disease is not as important. But in an endemic, it's extremely important. In other words, having the infection is not a thing to be concerned about. Your body will respond to it. It will take care of it. Disease that comes from your body's crisis around the infection, that's what you want to prevent. So vaccines are predominantly there to prevent disease and in part to prevent the spread of infection. But the whole thing about people reaching a level at which our society can move forward is that we can be infected by any manner of viruses and move on. And this has been the moving line over and over with COVID is, are people comfortable with folks getting infected? Because the people who don't want us to return to anything that looks like it used to look in our behavior are often saying, but infections still happen. And then other people say, but those infections are not leading to a level of disease that we don't have a response to, either because the medical system is overwhelmed or because of treatments. So yes, you're going to have a certain number of people, like with the flu or like with other diseases that are airborne via infections. And this is really the question is, can we start to distinguish between, I think there's even 3 categories for the public health people: infections, disease, and then death, right? And what you really want to preserve is death, which we have not done well in this country. The next is disease that has to be treated at a medical level. And preventing infection might not be the only way to do that. You have to do that for a short period of time because it's going to spread like wildfire through a system.
Right.
Okay, just one more thought on this, and were you going to say something?
Well, the frustrating thing is, there's a lot of evidence that says, like, if we had done a hard lockdown for 2 or 3 weeks in the very early days, we could have nipped this in the bud. And at any point along this, the last 2 years, if we had decided, okay, everyone's gonna lock down except for the bare essential, employees that need to keep the wheels on this thing, we could have been done with it. But now we're left with, kind of continuing to fight these battles and kind of half measures that don't quite do it, and leaving it up to the individuals in our society to determine what level of care they're going to take for each other. And I feel like we've failed that test as a society. Like, so many people have said, I'm not willing to do even the bare minimum to protect my neighbors. And that's been really disheartening.
Yeah, I've concluded this is the best this country could ever do on this issue. That with all things taken into consideration, it wasn't perfect, never would be, but this is about as good as it's going to get. This number of people getting vaccinated, this is just how this country is going to roll. And what's been confusing to me about this whole dynamic is back in the fall, the public health people predicted that Omicron would peak in January and then start to decline in February. Like, they knew it. They know how viruses like this spread, and their predictions were incredibly accurate. And what it didn't seem to follow was behavior either around mask wearing or vaccinations. So there are people trying to take all kinds of credit and some people trying to apply all kinds of blame for the behavior, but the people who study the movement of viruses are like, oh, this is just how it's going to move. And it almost doesn't matter on the grand scale of how long it's going to be around. It might matter for an individual, it might matter for a vulnerable community, what you do, and separating out the difference between what a vulnerable community is, how a vulnerable community is impacted versus what's going to stop the overall arc of a virus. The overall arc of a virus doesn't seem to be affected by the select peculiarities, like one state did a lockdown, another, because there's been all this competition, right? Like California locked down and Florida didn't, and then watch the numbers. And, in 1 month it's up in one place and then down, and then the next month it's up in another. And you just can't land it as simply as in places where they did these practices, this is what happened. In places where they utilized these practices, this is what happened. It doesn't work like that as a pandemic. It might work like that to protect a nursing home or to protect a school. But man, some of the places where you would think the virus is really going to spread, airplanes, come on. I mean, how is it possible that people who work in the whole industry of travel, airplanes, airports, hotel, all that, the numbers have not peaked in that sector at all. They've peaked in like sectors, of food production and other places. So it is a confusing, to just the common sense person, it's a confusing set of realities that we can't just simply say, look, we know what works. Again, I think we know what works for an individual to be benefited and the best way to protect, which is to get vaccinated and to limit your amount of infection possibilities.
Yeah.
As a pandemic as a whole, man, short of had we not locked down, 2 million people would have been dead is clearly an underestimate. Had we not locked down, because almost 1 million people so far have died of and with COVID in these 2 years, there's no doubt that number would have been more than doubled if we hadn't done anything. That's clear. So I don't know. I feel like some days we know so much more about this, and some days it feels like, good grief, we're right back to where we were. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just really, I don't know. But look, the non-response of culture in general to the anti-vax movement snuck up on a lot of people. I think a lot of us did not understand how many people had great personal and philosophical opposition to vaccines as a whole.
Yeah. That snuck up on me for sure. The people in my life, I'm like, wait, you?
Yeah, totally. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm okay.
It's like,
so here
you've had all the other vaccines.
Yes.
Throughout your lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah,
you've given your kids all the other vaccines, but this is the one.
Yeah, for the myriad reasons, and it's only gotten more severe. And now the new one about vaccinating kids under 5. Man, at this moment, for this to come right now at the end and like do this as precaution, I think there's a whole lot of parents that are like, look, I'm not going. If my child becomes infected, unless there's some great reason why why I should be concerned about this, I'm not going to get this vaccine. Those numbers are far, far below where people are for adults or even for teenagers in the midst of a pandemic. So I don't know. Yeah. COVID. It's just maybe someday.
But what it has pointed out is the weakness of our health system and the vulnerabilities of it. One being the lack of doctors and nurses and how long it takes to become a nurse or a doctor or a nurse practitioner. These pipelines to become a functioning doctor in America are so long, so expensive, and there's so many bottlenecks that we're really facing a shortage in the capacity of our system.
Yeah. And there seems to be no plan to fix it. The Atlantic has a great article out the last day or so. I guess it came out today, which has the headline, "Why does the U.S. make it so hard to be a doctor?" I think there's lots of reasons why they do, and a lot of those reasons are not very good ones. When you ask public health questions, it's so expensive to become a doctor. It's so selective, and the limitations put on doctors are so severe that people aren't going into that field anymore. It used to be, at least when I was, maybe it's because I was younger, and I thought that like being a doctor was like winning the lottery. Like life just came easy for you. And maybe it used to be that way and isn't now, or maybe I just misunderstood. But there was just sort of a lot of that. There was a lot of social credibility that went with a doctor. There was a lot of reward that went with being a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, man, I have so many friends that are doctors and are in the health fields, and they're just like, it's unbelievably miserable. How hard it is, how difficult it is. And again, we just keep talking about the reinsurance and health insurance, who's going to pay for it side of healthcare. The delivery side is still left up to a whole set of forces that make no sense. And when I hear people talk about universal healthcare or some version of that language, and the only thing they mean is insurance payment, not delivery, both at the doctor level, at the nursing level, at the hospital level, at the community center level. We have such a deep vulnerability in this society around health, and so many people living longer and thereby having greater levels of healthcare needs. It's unbelievable that we've gone the opposite direction of where we should have gone in healthcare. As healthcare has needed to become more expansive, we've gone a direction of making it more difficult for people to be healthcare providers, doctors and nurses all the way around. We talked about this last week with one of the candidates who's a doctor herself and running for Congress in South Carolina. And, I just hope somebody at the federal level starts to call for a major push for the federal government to make it possible for more people to become nurses and doctors, and to remove so many of the barriers, especially at the basic public health care level, right? I just think there's a kind of specialization that we send doctors and nurses through, and frankly, a hazing-like process to become a doctor or nurse. It is so grueling and so difficult. We need to be going the other way and getting people who are competent to be healthcare providers at a much higher rate, rather than having elite doctors and elite nurses and then a bunch of assistants that are paid minimum wage or slightly above providing all the care.
Right.
Those people are go to any hospital, go to any clinic, and you start to see this separation between the people that are kind of helping out and are very low compensated and hardly educated at all. And then this huge jump up to nurses, and especially specialized nurses and doctors and specialized doctors. That gap is enormous. And school is the same way. School teachers are in a very similar situation. We just put such burden on people becoming school teachers.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And then we talk about why we can't get good teachers and why there aren't more. And
right. Why there's a massive teacher shortage, and why schools cannot get substitute teachers. And
And like people literally who teach in college are not qualified to teach in high school. The people who instruct folks at the level that high school is supposed to send them to can't go to their local high school and say, could I teach a class in the area that I have a PhD in? The answer is no, because you're not educated as an educator.
Yeah.
We got to figure that out. And the same thing at the nursing level and the doctoring level. Like there should be competencies that people can provide that we just, I like the idea of a million nurse movement, that we get 1 million nurses funded and equipped in this country so that nursing is something you can scale up and scale down. Because for decades, it has been at a crisis level for nurses, and often not paid anywhere close to what they need to for the level of pressure that they're under. There's just it is so strangely broken because the healthcare system is where all the money is. So this isn't even like, well, we don't, like with schools where we don't fund our schools to an adequate level.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the amount of gross domestic product that goes into healthcare, it's massive.
Yeah.
And yet the people who deliver it, there's not enough of them, and they're not compensated in a way that preserves that industry. That no one is talking about this. I remember we did a presidential forum in January of 2020. We're asking some of the presidential candidates that were there if there was any movement at all on this, on the delivery side. And, the fear is that that's all going to mean socialism and doctors work for the government and all this, like they do at the VA or like they do in other military settings or like they do through community hospitals with block grants and all. And just so much hesitancy about that. And then COVID comes, we go into a nursing and doctoring crisis, and we're about to come out of that crisis moment. No one's talking about it. It is really something. I almost think we need a bus tour. We just need to tour around. Yeah.
Well, PJ said they'd back a million nurse march and patient care limits, expecting one nurse to care for 20 clients with 3 low-wage aides. That is insanity. Yeah, we're just asking way too much of too few nurses.
So a working example of this in some states, and this happened in California, there was a huge crisis around mental health clinicians, people that can work, whether there's a psychologist or a psychiatrist that can work with people with mental health. And they basically said to insurers, you're going to have a limit to the number of days that someone can go before getting an appointment if we're going to work with your clinic. Mm-hmm. If your clinic's going to be reimbursed for the work that it does, paid by insurance that's overseen by the state, I think it's 7 or 14 days. Like a person has to be able to see somebody who's licensed within 7 or 14 days. You can't have them 3 months out on this kind of thing. So there are ways that you can create incentives in the system and then start working with those who give credentialing to the nursing and doctors. Like there's a lot of forces that would have to come on this. And it's a big project to get to the point that you can say, good quality healthcare is available to people in this country. And why people can't move in and out of that industry, I just literally don't understand.
Why people are against it, like at a philosophical level of using any government money to make the world better, like through more doctors, more nurses, more health professionals, more mental health professionals. Like, it's a national security issue if huge swaths of our population are ill. Like, why wouldn't we want to have the best system in the world and treat the most people and make people better?
Yeah, and we're starting. And look, the system is starting to adjust. It used to be that you couldn't do almost any telehealth, especially like you couldn't see a psychiatrist, not in person. You couldn't cross state lines. You couldn't get a prescription without going into an office. And then COVID changed a lot of this, right? So I had to get a little prescription for this stupid psoriasis, eczema stuff that I have in my hand. And I was able to just like go onto some website and then send a picture and do a consult with somebody, like just texting back and forth in a chat room. And they're like, well, here's what I think you have. And I'm like, yep, I've been diagnosed with that before, but I need a prescription and I can't get one, without going into a doctor's office. And they said, well, here's what I'd prescribe. And they did, and I could use that prescription. So they figured it out, right? Like there was a workaround, and that's way better. What I needed, a person with a base level of knowledge, it truly, I'm glad that it was a full dermatologist. It didn't require a dermatologist. There's people with great expertise that would know what basic care you need for my hand ailment. Now, that's not saying that we don't need specialists and that we don't need really great doctors who can really get in and figure out all the real problems. But if you could separate out the kind of normal practicing and people having to have prescriptions and other things that require a visit and which makes sense, you do want that. This could be fixed at both the legislative level of what's demanded, but then also at the resource level.
Yeah.
They should have a Build Back Better like funding, like we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll get to, for childcare workers in this country, for nursing and doctors, both at the mental health and physical health side of things. It's just bonkers to me that hospitals are saying to people, we're not only out of space, which we can solve, we're out of staff. And we can't solve the staff question. That is something that the Biden administration has zero work going on in this. I mean, I don't know who the Health and Human Services people are that should be working on this, and I know they're also working on border issues, so they're overwhelmed. But maybe someday there'll be a big movement for this to really fund up the number of nurses and all the rest of it. And to make it like a GI Bill, right? Where the government pays for people to go get their nursing degrees.
Yeah.
I heard some nurses talking about why the big problem with people becoming nurses is that there aren't enough instructors in the nursing programs.
Yeah, so tons of people apply and very few even get accepted into the programs.
Yeah, it's like 10% or something. Truly, it's just bonkers. And the reason is because what you're paid to be an instructor is so minimal that no nurse wants to go through all the work to have to be verified as an instructor and then have to go to only be. So they don't have enough instructors because the pay incentives aren't there. Well, those are solvable conditions. There are so many unsolvable. There are so many things in our society that we can't solve with more time or money. So many issues that the ones you can solve with time and money, you should solve with time and money, because that we have. Like, you can dedicate more people's time and you can dedicate more money at the federal level anytime you want. Just ask the military.
Right.
There will be
somehow
enough.
They find the money. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a great side to a robust federal economy, right? That's the upside. Let's use it for something like this. All right. I'm clearly ramping up on an issue that needs more work. Hey, speaking of the military, Ukraine continues to just be bounced around by Russia and the other European and U.S. Desires in a way that's just also maddening. I sure hope and think there will not be military action by Russia in Ukraine, because this is all designed, as best I've heard from people, as a way for Russia to renegotiate ballistic missile treaties, NATO. What Putin doesn't want is to spend a bunch of money and kill a bunch of people in Ukraine. For what? To have to run the country of Ukraine, or to have another rebel force on his hands like they had in Afghanistan? They don't want that. So what does the guy want? And somehow, a lot of people in the U.S. feel like it's our thing to solve. And I don't totally understand all of this, but Putin has clearly found the bruise and keeps pushing on it at the international and United States level to get a response.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he knows that this is buying him leverage either way. Like, you mass an army on a border and people have to pay attention.
Yep.
But yeah, it seems like he doesn't want an actual war. That's not good for him in the long run. But he wants an easing of sanctions. He wants like these concessions. But yeah, this is also how wars get started, because all of a sudden someone starts shooting and things escalate. So it's not a good deal for anyone.
War is always a temporary condition. Right. War is what you do after negotiations have failed and before negotiations take place. So every war ends with one side saying, we will now negotiate. Mm-hmm. It's a temporary state. So if you can get there without that temporary state, you should just get there. The idea that you're just going to have wars and we should be prepared for it and we're going to have them, you kind of got to blow off steam and get it out of the system, is just so weirdly broken. That's not how life works. That's certainly not how war works. Every military leader will tell you war does nothing but raise the level of demand for negotiation. So just skip it altogether. And the U.S. is trying to do that. I think the U.S. is also doing a lot of messaging to try to call the bluff of Putin. I think that's part of what's going on. And the they're going to attack, they're going to attack, they're going to attack is designed to make Russia say, you don't know what we're going to do. I mean, there's a chess game going on here that's not just about what's currently happening in Ukraine or what's going to happen in the next 6 months. It goes back to 2014, goes back to 2002. It's long and complicated. And every headline, everything else that we see are just shadows of what's actually going on. So I personally don't have as much worry about Ukraine, but what do I know about, literally what's going to go on in Ukraine? It just keeps showing up in our news cycle for reasons that I think have nothing to do with fears that any of us should actually hold, even if you care for people. Because the people in Ukraine are like, look, we don't think they're going to go to war against us. What are they going to do? So it has to do with all manner of things. And there's a very long comment in here from PJ. PJ is on fire today. The fingers are flying.
That looks like a copy paste to me. I mean, unless they're really fast.
About this Canadian convoy and this Canadian takeover of the federal government city of Ottawa.
Yeah, I'm really curious your take on this, Doug, because this is public protest, which we're typically for. And then there's some mixed messages coming from the convoy about the reasons and who's included, and there's some accusations of them being pretty right-wing and racist. Other people saying, no, they're just workers. We need to support the workers.
So it comes from truckers not wanting the vaccine mandates to be put on other truckers, even though in Canada, something like 80 or 90% of truckers are vaccinated. It's people saying, on principle, we think you shouldn't be requiring this of truckers, partly because of the way trucker job is performed. That's what started the whole thing. Then it, like everything else, was funded and taken over by lots of other forces. So any big protest, I've been involved in lots of them, often involve many groups that have different agendas that come together. The group that has taken over this protests in Ottawa and then at the Detroit, Canada border is clearly in messaging been taken over by people that want the Canadian government to come to an end. They called for it to be a January 6th like experience. So that's what they are demanding and wanting. It's not everybody, but that's who's taken it over. And it has become lawless. It hasn't just become law breaking, which sometimes one needs to do to block a highway or block a road to raise awareness around something, and then you take the consequences of that breaking of the law action. Lawlessness, which many of the militia groups, the Trump approach, I think this convoy is, we don't care about the laws. So we just reject your authority, full stop. Mm-hmm. That's not law breaking. That's lawlessness. That's not giving credence to the laws that exist. To be engaged in public protest and to even violate the current laws and then to pay the consequence of that. Think of King going to jail, or a person being arrested for a Black Lives Matter protest, or a person being arrested outside the Supreme Court. These are things you do. Mm-hmm. That's part of public protest, and there's a whole response for that. When someone says, oh, we reject your authority, we will run over your police, we will beat you with a flag, we will not move our trucks on demand, we will stop a city from functioning for weeks, we will stop international borders from functioning with no care or concern for a set of demands that are at all reasonable. Like the government of Canada is not going to disband. So that's right. That's not a reasonable thing. Well, this is what's going on up there. The strange, all my friends that joke and say stuff like, I don't know, if such and such happens, I'm going to move to Canada. I'm like, you think you're going to get away from the things in the U.S. you don't want in Canada? There's just less of it in Canada than there is in the United States. It's not non-existent. These kinds of anti-government and almost by default right-wing, sometimes extreme left-wing, but most often right-wing approaches are in every country. They really, really are. You have to deal with it wherever you live and not just think that there's a panacea someplace where these things don't exist. But this one has totally gotten out of control. And the Canadian, I listen to a lot of Canadian Broadcasting Network. Do you ever listen to the CBN?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the people at CBN are like to the, the federal government and the city government of Ottawa, like, what are you doing? You can't just let people pull in and then set up, Mardi Gras for weeks in your city. Like, do something. And they're like, well, we don't want to escalate this. And they're like, escalate? What do you think? It's escalated. So they're being bullied there. And so, Canada's going to have its own response to what they do about this convoy and the myriad convoys that are popping up around the country. But I think they're unleashing something in the Canadian, especially in the center state Canadian, the center of Canada, that's really different than the east and west coast, like it is in the U.S. That's they've got their hands on something that I'm not sure is going to be all that clear for how to handle. It's but I think they broke open last night or this morning. I think they've got some of that port going, and Canada will probably play the slow game on this, and they'll be like, we're not going to make you move, but when you finally move, we're going to come after you. And they're talking about like revoking drivers' privileges for truckers whose trucks were involved in this, confiscating their property, sending them fines and bills and warrants for their arrest for criminal behavior. Like, when this is all done, justice is going to sweep in, and you're going to pay an extraordinarily high price for what's gone on. That's a very Canadian way to deal with it. Well, the U.S. would, just send rubber bullets flying and break that thing up. So it's really something, and they've caused a real crisis. It's going to cause some inflation bump and some more supply chain issues.
Yeah. We've got plenty of supply chain issues, and why don't we just shut down a main thoroughfare between countries for fun?
And it also reminds us that not having open borders is a real problem, isn't it? See, open borders is really a good thing. Well, it's been a heavy day. I just think, greatest lessons learned probably come from Team Fluff, just cute little puppies.
Just end with that moment of zen, the puppy bowl.
Play toy in your mouth and running across the line, and everybody gets excited for you, and you get a treat. How about that? May that be your Valentine's Day, right? That you find your squeaky toy, you run across a line, and someone gives you a treat. Who was the guy that said that the Super Bowl was overly sexualized? What was it? Who was that?
Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk. Yeah. If Charlie Kirk had heard what I just said, that you find your squeak toy and put it in your mouth and run across your finishing line and get
sexual
a treat.
Anarchy, Doug.
That's common good. The Common Good podcast has leaned into sexual anarchy. But may you find your squeak toy.
Yeah.
All of us. Well, what a full day. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow. Politics, Wednesday, faith, all the rest. And we're also going to be traveling the country, friends. We're going to be on a Common Good immigration tour through the great cities of Pittsburgh, Columbus, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Holland, Michigan, South Bend, Indiana, Madison, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, March 19th through the 27th. Keep an eye out for all that. Come and join us and help us to raise your voice, and as we like to say, wake up, speak up, and stand up for some Common Good immigration. Yeah.
And thanks to everyone in the chat. Very active chat. Love having you in on the conversation. Thank you
so much. Sorry we can't show all of these, but to all of you, hey, send us a note wherever you are, and we'll send you a little something for your comments today. So all of you, PJ especially, you've been working those fingers hard. Peggy and Matt and Jim and Stefan.
Mark.
And Jim, and did I say Jim already? And Mike, all of you. Send us a little note, and we'll shoot you a little swag.
Barbara,
all right.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, Dan? Are we good?
We're great.
Enough for today?
Yep.
All right.
Take care, everybody. Bye.